So guys, today is Friday, August 2. And I just would like to remind you guys that at the end of this month, this podcast will be going on hiatus. So don't be surprised, don't be shocked because I gave you forewarning. These are the last precious few episodes. And speaking of it being August, I'm at ASI right now, and this interview that I'm about to share with you was recorded a while ago on account of I've been traveling so much, but I just ran into Jose Briones, Pastor Jose, the host of Disruptive Adventism here at ASI yesterday. So you'll get to hear my conversation with him from a while ago, but in the interim, since this interview happened, he got his hit piece. So we're talking with a real live heretic, a real Adventist heretic. We talk about basically money in Adventism, why people give, why they don't. About tithe. He lets you guys off the hook for tithing, even though he's a conference pastor. So, like I said, a real heretic. He got his Fulcrum 7 hit piece, and is apparently interviewing them today, maybe. So keep a lookout for that interview on his podcast. And in the meantime, listen to me try to wrangle his sermonizing back in order. All right. While I continue recovering from all my illnesses, I'll see you guys on the other side.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on my show. I'm excited to talk to you. First of all, can you just tell us who you are, about your podcast also, because we're all fans of Disruptive Adventism, and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Jose Briones. I am the host of Disruptive Adventism. I'm a millennial. I live in Georgia. And, I produce shows and I engage in conversations and, the Adventist world. I like to create change, disrupt certain things in a positive sense, not
Nice.
always in a negative sense. But
sometimes.
yeah, sometimes. I mean, you have to gain, but you also have to lose certain things that, sometimes you think are good. They may not be good, so you have to disrupt them, you have to change them, morph them. But that's what I do. I work with churches, so I work and I help people find their spiritual growth. And that's what my podcast is about, trying to make it through this Adventist world and highlight people and what they do.
Cool. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit because we're kind of both in this digital space, and I wanted to talk to you about sort of what we see as the differences between what compels our generation to get involved and to give and to support things that they care about versus what motivates our parents' generation or really any other generation, and kind of talk about like how we see that. So,
Sure.
I guess my first question is, you have a Patreon for your podcast, right?
That's correct.
Can you just talk about, for anybody who may not know, just briefly what Patreon is and how it works?
Yeah. Patreon is a platform where you can donate to the creatives out there. So like the people that are creating content, that are producing content, usually you'll find a lot of artists, you'll find a lot of podcasts, YouTubers, they don't get, depending on how you are. I mean, if you're like a super tech blogger, you don't need a Patreon because you get enough from YouTube ad revenue.
Yeah.
But for the smaller guys, like, smaller people that are creating content, that are creating, that they're not using, their platform, they're not getting that traction yet, that they don't have that amount of money, they create a Patreon account where you can sign up and support from $1 a month and up. So, for example, one of my favorite YouTubers, Matt Diavella, great guy. He's like super on the, he's like super minimalist and like he makes awesome videos. Like his videos are amazing. His main income comes from Patreon because he doesn't have ads on his YouTube channel. And the reason why he doesn't have ads is because he wants people to support him. And he has, I think, about 1,000 people that support him, maybe a little bit more.
Nice.
And that's his income, but he's producing content. He's a filmmaker, and, he just continues doing what he's doing, which I think is a great thing. So Patreon is a platform that allows people to contribute to, their preferred creative person.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting format because, and this is something I had meant to talk to Caleb when he came on about, but we never got around to it. But the fact that, like, the creative spaces and art in general is kind of hard to monetize. And so this is a model that they came up with to sort of figure out a way to do that. But you have a Patreon for Disruptive Adventism, right? Can you talk about how you feel that's going? If you found support there and if you see a future there for creatives?
So I started with kind of like a similar mentality that Matt Diavella started. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to put ads on my podcast because I'm a huge podcast listener and I really don't like ads, to be honest. Like, I think that they're intrusive. I think that you can just do without them. So in the first couple, I think maybe 80, not 80, a little bit less, maybe like 65, 70 episodes of Disruptive Adventism, we didn't have ads. So we just allowed people to go to Patreon, and we only been at it for a year. So, for a year, it's been pretty good. We have about 12 people that donate, different range, different quantities. Some people donate $1, some people donate $5, some people are donating $20. So it's mixed. It depends on everyone's level of financial stability and things of that nature. But so far, for a year we have about 12 people, and that's
nice.
That's pretty good. It's not.
Yeah, and that's like, because it's regular, consistently giving.
Yeah, it is. It is monthly, and it's not a lot of money, but, it helps to pay the bills. Like something that a lot of people don't realize when it comes to creating things or, even just this podcast is like you have a website to host it. You need that's just if you want to put it in a platform, right? So you have host fees. Then if you have a website, then you have to pay that, website domain. Then you have to pay the website as a whole. Like, let's say you're using Squarespace or you're using Wix or you're using, maybe you're using your own thing, and all of that kind of starts adding up. Then on top of that, like, you have to buy a mic, and then you have to buy an audio interface, and then you have to have a computer, and then you have to have a program that runs
It starts
racking up pretty quick. I mean, like, in the past year, I spent about $2,500 in all of that.
Easily, yeah.
It's just like, I mean, I have a good mic, I think. It's one of the best in the industry, but we got there after a couple of months of having some support from people, which was great. But the bills rack up, and then, I mean, of course, on top of that, if that's your only income, like you have to pay rent and all of the other things that come when it comes to creating. So for the first almost a year, I think it was like about 10 months, we didn't do ads. But after like recognizing that, hey, I cannot just like, I have a job, like I had to take care of my own stuff, and like I cannot let that throw my budget off, because we all have student loans. All the young people have student loans. Most people, at least most young people, have student loans, and I gotta pay them. I gotta be responsible. So because of that, I was like, hey, I'm about to start having my student loans, let me actually take on some ads, like, and so we're now taking ads in Disruptive Adventism.
Do you feel like you violated your principles?
It was tough in the beginning. It was really tough, honestly, because I was like, oh man, like I wish more people would have, donated. I had like a goal that it was like, if we can get to 250, right? Like $250, I will not put ads, because, that's a good steady income, like,
That's
every
sustainable,
month.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very sustainable, So, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna start doing ads. I mean, if NPR and the Daily and all the best podcasts out there do it, I might as well do it. So I started getting on ads, and it's been pretty good because they pay you every 1,000 listens. So every 1,000 listens they give you 15-20 bucks. So like,
Yeah.
we're getting a good amount of listens, and that really helps to pay the bills. I mean, and I started cutting corners now. Like, I'm hosting a different host now. I removed my Squarespace. If you're checking the website, it probably will still be down because we're doing some renovations. We're working to do it better, just because like, something that a lot of people will tell you like, hey, do your website on Squarespace. It's a great place. And I agree if you're just trying to like, get a template and that's it. But if you're trying to do more complex things, it's probably not very customizable. So we want to go a little bit further, create a little bit of a visual experience for people to come into, when they come to our website. And that's what we're going to do. So we're switching a lot of stuff. It's going to take a little bit more money, but, we cut corners some places, and we're allowing it to be, used in other places. So that's been my experience with Patreon this year. And I hope it picks up. The more people that listen, the more people are willing. Some people will do it, faster, and, some people will do it, slower.
So do you have any idea of the demographic of the people that contribute to you, and what do you think, how have you gained the contributors that you have, and what do you think is motivating people to decide, hey, I should support disruptive advertising?
Yeah. I think that, yes, I do have access to the demographics. We have literally everyone in the spectrum. We have Asians, we have Black people, we have white people, we have Latinos. We have everybody.
Are they like in a certain age range?
We have from baby boomers all the way to Gen Y,
nice.
So all the way to millennial. I don't think we have a Gen Z, and I think it's for obvious reasons because, they're still getting into college, like they're like, no, actually, when I earn money, I wanted to keep it, which I get.
I mean, millennials are still complaining about not having money, so.
Well, that's just, different, everybody is in a different financial situation, and millennials have been, screwed up. I mean, that's part of it. I don't think that's an excuse. To like say like, oh, I've been screwed up and like, I cannot do anything about it. But I think that, we have it a little bit against ourselves. So yes, it is a little bit harder, but you can find your way out. If the right conditions, because, we also have to understand that there are some people that may want to get out, but they can't. Like the system does not like them, usually minorities, and, the system prevents them with different things, or like healthcare. That's a big thing right now in the political conversation, and how that hinders a lot of your progress or different things. But that's where I think Adventism can come in, because Adventism has a lot of resources that help people move up in the ladder, not only spiritually, but also in society. And by spiritually, I don't mean that there's like a point system, but like, you improve, you grow. So that's my point.
Yeah. I want to go back. I'm interested. I'm surprised to hear that you have kind of a spread across generations of support. Just because of the nature of new media and sort of the digital space, I would have sort of initially expected to see more younger people. Do you think there is a different reason for each generation to be compelled to give, or do you think that it's equally applicable, especially in the context that we're talking, this digital space? Is it equally applicable for everyone?
I think that there is a different reason. I know that there's a different reason. Something that I've been kind of like I've tried to be intentional is to reach out to the patrons. Like, once every 3 months or once every 4 months. Like, we're about to send a couple of extra cards. Like we always send cards. Like, we ask for feedback or whatever. Like, we always ask for people to come in and to help us out. For the Gen Xers and baby boomers, they've seen some value in it. And honestly, I mean, to a certain degree, they're like, hey, I know you, like, I know that what you're doing and it's helping me, and helping young people out there. So we're going to give to you. More millennials the millennials have been like, okay, I really like this. Like, I really want to support. And they have done so, and I appreciate that, because I understand, like, people from my generation may not have all the money in the world, but yeah,
That's interesting. So would you say maybe a distinction you could make is that the older generations are more compelled by personal connection and younger generations are more compelled by cause?
I think that's possible. Definitely requires connection in both. Like, if I wasn't connected to some of the people that, I think I only don't really know, like, really, really, really have interacted with maybe 3 or 4 patrons. Like, like they just found our page and, they listened to our content and they were like, you know what, I'm going to help out. Like, I'm going to do this. Besides everybody else, I have had a connection, like some sort of like, hey, like, oh, you're helping out churches. Oh, you're helping out young people. Like, oh, I know you. Like, yeah, you've done that for us before. Like, or whatever. I would say a connection is still necessary. But I think that, it's just a product of your time. Like, millennials are definitely driven by a cause, but I mean, the baby boomers and Gen Xers were also driven by a cause back in the day as well. Like, it's just that nowadays, the cause has taken into a different flavor, in a different format, which is the, broadcasting media, social media and YouTube, like, and stuff like that. So things have changed a lot. We just have to realize that. But yeah, I mean, I think that millennials are driven by a cause right now because, well, that's the only thing that will spark them, in the same way that their parents and their grandparents were driven by a cause, like the causes of their time,
Yeah. Do you think that recently I've been hearing a lot of people our age like lamenting or complaining about the idea of giving to the church as an organization, like they're tied to the conference.
Yes.
Do you think that is a huge problem, and do you think it can be replaced or supplemented with this sort of independent grassroots stuff, or do you think everyone is sort of making the same mistakes across the board in whatever venues we're trying to fundraise?
So you're saying that, okay, so let me just get the question straight. So first question is, do I think that, millennials are not giving to the church?
Well, yeah, that could be part of the question. That's what I've heard. Have you heard something similar, I guess, is the first part of the question.
I think millennials are really reconsidering their way of giving, because they see that the global mission does not start from a local context. So what that means is, if you're an Adventist, you've done this as a kid or maybe as a teenager. I know I've done this for all the Sabbath school lessons that I'm aware of. Every time a Sabbath school lesson came, I remember as a kid and still as an adult, I always go to the back page and I look at the map to see what's the mission or where the money is going. And the reason why I did that as a child is because I wanted my field, right, to be featured. Like to like, oh wow, yeah, that's my country, like, yeah, like actually the money is coming here, like everybody, wow, like, and I felt that kind of connection, with people. The thing is that as time has gone by, I realized that, my local context has never been featured. And there are projects out there, the mission projects, right? The schools that are being built and like the 13th Sabbath offering, whatever, the missional offering that we always send, that it's going out there, it's going out there, it's going out there. And I think that, especially in North America, people are getting tired of that. Now, they feel like the tithe is not doing any good for them. And I'll give you an example. I live in Georgia, and I live in South Georgia. So if you've ever been to South Georgia, you know that anything below Atlanta, it starts to get a little bit more difficult. Like the towns the towns get a little bit smaller and smaller, as the rural Georgia, and you have less support because, for the conferences and the big events, everything happens in Atlanta, in the Atlanta area, or above, like, you have Southern Adventist University. And, for a lot of the members in this area, they feel like, hey, a lot of things are happening over there, like in Atlanta, in Collegedale, Tennessee. Same thing happens in most conferences. There's always an area, for the most part, that has not been, well taken care of. It's like too far from the conference. Like they feel like they're not, taken care of. And I think the reason why is because, and they feel like, hey, we've been sending all this money, this 10%, right? And the only thing that you're sending is a pastor to us, but you're not sending other resources.
But do you think, I mean, I can see that. I can definitely see that as a motivating factor for those groups of people. But don't you think, like, I'm in Loma Linda. There's plenty of money in this conference, but I still see the same problem of our generation being unwilling to give tithe to the organization.
And I mean, part of it is distrust. I mean, part of it is just like lack of trust, lack of like, what are you going to do with my money? Another thing is that lack of faithfulness. I mean, let's call it like what it is. Like, some people do not like to give their money, and they hold their money, they love their money, and they are not following at least what we understand the Bible to say, that you should have a cheerful giving heart. Like, and that part of that is, the tithe. Now, when it comes to the tithe conversation, I think that we need to revise certain things in our practice. I think our belief is solid. We have a solid system that is based on either the New Testament or the Old Testament. Whether you want it or whichever way you want it. The Old Testament has a tithing rule, like it's like a 10%. The New Testament is even more radical. It's like, just give, like, give as much as you want. It doesn't matter how much it is. Like, I mean, in the book of Acts, they had everything in common. Like, they probably gave a lot of stuff, gave a lot of money, and I mean, we have a pretty graphic story in the book of Acts when, two people decided that they were not going to give everything that they had promised to give, and they were consumed, and
so that, that segues kind of into the second part of the question that I wanted to ask, which is if people are not giving, if part of the reason people are not giving to the conference is because they're just unwilling to give, does that then mean that grassroots stuff like our podcasts are also doomed simply because people just don't want to give at all?
Yeah, I mean, for the grassroots movement is harder, I will say, because
you think?
Yeah, I will say so.
Even with the distrust of organizations in our generation?
Yes, because organizations still have, Martin Heidegger, he's a philosopher, and Ludwig Wittgenstein also, like, they run by each other, but Wittgenstein has this phrase, a picture held us captive. Like, the idea that this picture, this idea that has been enframed in society has held you captive. And that's part of the organization, like how many years have you heard that, you're supposed to give tithe to the church? Like, that image is ingrained in your brain. Like, and for me, it's like, if I don't give to the church, I feel guilty, like, I mean, personally. And
is that healthy?
I don't think it's healthy. I mean, that's why I'm saying I've been trying to rework the way I give.
Yeah.
Because I realized, like, hey, like, here's one thing that I've started to realize from a personal perspective. We ask our members in the Seventh-day Adventist Church to not only give tithe, but to give more than that. We ask them to give even double tithe. Like, we're like, you should give 10% tithe, right? What God
Plus
asks
offering.
of you.
Yeah.
And 10% offering, right? 5%, 10% offering. And like, I started just running numbers, and it's like, that's a lot of crippling an individual. Like if this individual has debt, if this individual has health problems,
that's a fifth of your income.
20% is a lot of money. So I started to ask the question, instead of saying like, okay, why are you asking 20% for me? Like, the Lord is asking 10% for me, and everything else is offering. Sure. That's how, Old Testament views it. New Testament, give. Like, give, offerings, give tithe, give whatever. Just make sure that you're giving, that you have a cheerful heart when you give. But we ask 20% from people, and we don't ask like, how much are they getting in return? Because the church is not, hey, I'm going to take your money and run with it. The church is an entity that is supposed to serve its body. Like, like the members are serving the members. So like, for me, I'm starting to look at, hey, the Lord asks for 10%. That's what he's asking of me. Where I'm going to put that 10% is my choice. It's a dangerous, lifestyle to live by in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but I think it's a more effective one because it's more aligned with, our belief that the mission starts in the local church. So let me give you an example of what I think should be a little bit of more of our policy, So a lot of the ask your pastor, go ahead, go ask your pastor. Like, if you're in a small church, if you're in a medium church, if you're in a large church, probably you're not going to have this problem. But let's say you're in a small or medium church, go ask your pastor if they have budget problems. And you're probably going to find out that your church has budget problems because not a lot of people give offering, but a lot of people give tithe. But that tithe does not always return in order to cover the everyday month by month expenses of the church. So if the Lord asks 10% from you, that doesn't mean that it should go in your tithe, in the tithe line. I mean, at least that's what I've come to understand from, my current situation and my current study of the word. It's like, you're supposed to give 10%. You can give 5 to that line, that says 10%. That line was created by an organization. That line was not created by God,
Ooh, and you're a pastor.
Hey, I mean, I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a little bit dangerous to live by this, but here's the reality. A lot of churches are suffering, and we're not giving our money. We're giving our money to the church, but we have been told that the storehouse, that the place where you're supposed to keep all this money is the conference. I don't see any conference in the Bible. I'm sorry. Like, that's just what it is. And,
everyone, you're off the hook per Pastor Briones.
I guess so, I mean, it's not that you're off the hook. You're supposed to give, like, and I believe that God really rewards its people, but I don't think that we should force people to say, like, this line is where you're supposed to give your 10%. And this line is where I feel like you're supposed to decide that, because, like, everybody has its own method, of contributing to the church. And I think that because right now the conversation, especially among theologians and pastors, is like, oh, well, like, if we don't give the 10%, that means that we're going to go into congregationalism. I'm like, and that means that all the money stays in the church, like, and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know what? That's a false assumption. Like, if people start, like, splitting their money, I mean, if anything, here's what happens with congregationalism. Let's say that everybody decides to give 5%, like, okay, you're going to give your 10% to God, but the way that you're going to distribute it is that you're going to send 5% to your to your local conference, and then you're going to send 5% to your local church budget. If anything, what that can do is that it allows your church, right? It allows your church to grow because it has more money. Then that means that more people are going to come. Like, let's say you have a 25, 30 member church. That's usually practical in very rural places. Or maybe you have a 60, 75, medium-sized church. if you start putting more money towards local offering, right? Like, your Sabbath school ministry, your women's ministries, your men's ministries, your youth ministries, right? If you start putting 5% out of your 10% towards that, think about how much money those ministries will have to do activities to attract people to come. And by that rule, more people will come to church, which will increase the tithe that is sent to the conference. And I mean, the only thing that I ask of is like, some people is gonna listen to this and take it to the extreme. But the only thing that I ask, when you're, for those of you who are listening, is like, don't take this and just say like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna give my money to the conference. No, that's not the spirit. The spirit is like, I want to do more local mission so that my church grows. And by that product, we're going to be able to support the conference even greater, because it's true that the mission starts locally, but the mission needs to go forth globally. And like, that's why North America has, we had the most numbers of missionaries, more people going out there, because, we have more resources. The dollar is, more powerful than most, other currencies, and that's just the reality. But like, the more you give to your local church, the more you distribute, the more it's going to grow. Because how is your youth ministry going to provide pizza for the hungry teenagers and college students if they don't have money to do that? So like, that's another thing that I think we have been indoctrinated into giving, right? Like, it's like, give your 10% to the tithe, right? To the line that says tithe, and then give 5% to the local church budget, because then that trickles down all the way into, all of the ministries. But if you really think about it, 5% of your income then trickle down by, then they take that 5% and they divide it up all the different ways. You don't really have control over where your money is going. But rather, like, if you put it towards youth ministries because you want your church to continue to have and attract young people, right? Then that ministry is going to grow. And it's going to be easier and faster and better because you're putting your money towards that cause, which by that, I hope it grows. And by growing, then you can support the conference even further. Because, some conferences, not all conferences, but some conferences are having problems in North America. They're declining in their tithe, they're declining in their offerings, they're declining in their membership because churches don't have enough money to do events. VBSs don't pay themselves,
Yeah, that's true. We're kind of coming to the end of our time here, but I have one last question for you.
Go ahead. Sorry, I did a sermon. I'm sorry.
No. It's all good. I've talked a little bit on my podcast about the concept of financial independence and retiring early, and I know that we kind of share some interest in like how we can sort of better our own financial situations. For our other people in our generation who feel like they're not in a position to give, and you and I say, man, 20%, that's a lot. And for people who say, ooh, even 10%, that's a lot. Do you have any advice for people to just be able to feel like, yeah, it's a leap of faith to give my tithe, but also I can still do it?
You know what? Here's the thing. Most Americans, it depends on your situation. Somebody may be listening. It's like, I'm in poverty. Like, I'm below the poverty line, and I've been there. I just want to say that I've been there. I've lived there. I lived on the poverty line. I lived below the poverty line, and like when I came to America, the place where I used to live was a basement that is very, very small, that, everything was crammed, and I don't even remember the measurements, but it was very, very small and had a lot of hardships. But I stayed faithful, and I'm not going to say that that's why I came out and like, wow, like, that turned around my life. But here's my thing, if you're struggling, if you are saying like, 10% is a lot, look where you're giving that 10%, and if is that entity that is getting your 10% returning even more to you? Because I believe in fairness. I believe that there's a leap of faith, but I also believe in fairness. So like, if you are saying like, you know what, I'm struggling to make this 10%, you're being faithful to God. That's what it is. You're being generous. You're giving of your money. Of course, like if you budget, like, you're going to have more money. But even here, if you stay faithful to that 10%, right? Go talk to your pastor if you're struggling. If you cannot make, ends meet, like, if you cannot make enough money, go talk to your pastor, and like, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, yeah. They're always asking for handouts. No. Ask your pastor, sit down and be like, look, pastor, I'm going through a very tough time, but this is what I can do. How can you help me? How can your church help you? And I hope that the Seventh-day Adventist Church helps you, because I know other churches that do help you. Like, and that's been a learning lesson for me. I've seen other churches, other denominations that are more willing to help the poor than your local Seventh-day Adventist church. And I wish it was the other way around, that the poor, that the people that need the most will be fed by food programs, food banks, like, and stuff like that. Like, be faithful, but also ask for your church to be fair to you, because you being a congregant, you giving your 10% means that you are part of this community that is supposed to take care of you. And if they're not taking care of you, you need to ask. If you ask and they don't take care of you, then you can find a different community that wants to take care of you. Because that's just the reality. Some churches are toxic and they don't want to take care of you. And, find the church, find the community of faith that really, really wants to take care of you. By you.
And if it takes going down to the Sunday church?
Well, sometimes some Sunday churches are better than some Adventist churches. That's just the reality. I mean, going to church on Sunday is, hey, the mark of the beast is not
We don't
here
need
yet,
to open that can of worms right now.
Yeah. But I mean, like, yeah, if you have to go to a Sunday church for them to help you, I'm pretty sure they will. So, but I hope
Right.
I hope
cool.
that's not
Well,
the case.
good advice. Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. This is an interesting discussion. I think everybody has an opinion and something to say about tithe and their money. If people want to find Disruptive Adventism, how can they find you? Where can they find you?
Yes. So we are on all the platforms. We are on iTunes, Spotify. We're on, you name it. You name your podcast aggregator, whatever your podcatching app, you'll find us there. You can also find us at disruptiveadventism.org. Hopefully by the time that this is released, the website will be up. And the other way is disruptiveadventism@gmail.com. And also on Instagram, on Facebook. Like, if you have social networks and social media, go ahead, follow us. And also, I preach a lot, but I also do what I preach. So if you need anything, any kind of assistance or whatever, like, I'm here for you.
Nice.
Like, send us an email, send us a DM. We'll try to hook you up with somebody in the area that we know. We have a different contacts in different states or whatever, even outside the states. If you need help, we're here to help you out. And,
Awesome.
I believe that there are churches around that are willing to help you out.
So everyone call Jose, and then once you're helped out, take some of your 10% and shoot it over to the Disruptive Adventism Patreon.
Hey, there it is.
All right. Well, thanks. And if anybody wants to find me, you can find me at adventistmillennial@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at SDAMillennial, on Facebook, on the Slack space, all of the above. And we will see you guys next week.